Everyone sits up here.
Hi. Oh, I have a hard time finding when I go birthday. Or what just call like the phones are so hard to use.
Yeah, they are.
It's just called oh, you mean the phones?
Yeah, the droids.
Every time I want to open it, I re-download it because I can't find it. Lucky for them, I found it.
Great. Okay. Okay, we're all ready?
We're ready. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'll come up from
Okay.
the ground.
Welcome to the 2025 Annual Conference and Book Fair in Los Angeles, California. I am Chris Biak, a member of the AWP Board of Directors. Here's a visual description of myself. I'm a white woman in a black suit with a patterned top. The Association of Writers and Writing Programs is a small but mighty nonprofit organization that amplifies the voices of writers in academic programs that serve them, all while championing diversity and excellence in creative writing. I'm a member of AWP's Board of Directors, but first and foremost, I'm a member of AWP. Membership with AWP provides me with writing resources year-round, but just as importantly, it allows me to support other writers, especially those who are just starting out. My membership dues help writers find meaningful careers and publication opportunities and make services like Writer-to-Writer Mentorship Program possible. If you haven't already, I invite you to become a member today. We are delighted to bring you this event today. I'd like to acknowledge and thank all of our conference sponsors and the literary partner hosting this event, Nightboat Books. Our literary partners and sponsors allow AWP to present these extraordinary literary events and help us keep our conference affordable and accessible. Please join me in thanking all of our conference sponsors and partners for their support and participation. Now, before we start, I do need to do some brief housekeeping. Please silence your cell phones. Remember, there is no flash photography allowed during the presentation. Respect seats marked as reserved for attendees with accessibility needs. And please give the authors about 10 minutes after the presentation to get to the book signing table before approaching them to have your book signed, and that's out in the hallway down there. Thank you, and now it's my great pleasure to welcome Stephen Motika, who will introduce this fantastic event. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and it's an honor to be here in Los Angeles to celebrate the start of Nightboat Books' 20th anniversary year. We've had a thrilling few days of events across the city, and we're delighted to be before you now on this AWP stage. Thanks to you all for being here. Thanks to our panelists, to AWP, and to the board and staff of Nightboat Books. Nightboat Books has grown in 2 decades to be one of the nation's leading independent presses, publishing 15 to 20 new books a year. We publish poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and hybrid works. In addition to publishing books by living authors, some of our most beloved titles are from the archive. The Faggots and Their Friends Between Revolutions by Ned Asta and Larry Mitchell was self-published nearly 50 years ago. Long out of print, it was passed via photocopy and PDF amongst queer readers and communities. We reissued the book in 2019 with a foreword by Tourmaline and an introduction by Morgan Basichis. It has become our best-selling title and continues to be a trenchant, pleasure-filled book of resistance and fierceness. It's a manifesto, it's a fable, it's art. Its story is a reminder of the power of literature and books, a reminder to center books in our lives and invite them to be guides and tools for imagining a future with hope. Our books are prescient through this time of ecological devastation, rising fascism, war and genocide, threats to queer life and livelihood. Thank you for reading and sharing our titles with other readers. Your engagement is the lifeblood of what we do and why we do it. This afternoon, you'll hear first from our co-founder, Kazim Ali, poet, essayist, novelist, memoirist, editor, and professor. Thank you, Kazim, for your vision and fortitude in dreaming up the Nightboat. It's been an honor to work with you for these 20 years. Following Kazim, I'm delighted that Jackie Wang is here. Her Nightboat book, The Sunflower Cast a Spell to Save Us from the World, was a National Book Award finalist in poetry a couple years ago. Following Jackie, Brandon Sam will read. We published his wonderful tribute horse, which won our Nightboat Poetry Prize and went on to receive the Kate Tufts Discovery Award. Brandon's lyric poetics are unmatched, and he was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for his second book, Treepas. Congratulations, Brandon. Nightboat Books has published Ryan Teare's two latest books, Doomstead Days, winner of the Four Quartets Prize and finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, and poem Bitten by a Man, which won the William Carlos Williams Award. Brian's research-based poems plumb rich terrains of queerness, ecology, disability, and artistic creativity. Our final reader will be Lundy Martin, author of 3 Nightboat books of poems, most recently Instruction for the Lovers, which was a 2024 National Book Critics Circle Award finalist, a vivid collection of poems on family, queer polyamory, lesbian sex, and blackness. Each poet will open their reading with a work of another Nightboat author, so you'll get a glimpse of the range and variety of what Nightboat does. I also invite you to purchase books by these authors after the reading and visit our booth, booth number 335, in the book fair later this afternoon or tomorrow. Now please join me in welcoming Kazim Ali.
Thank you, Stephen, so much, and thank all of you for coming here to celebrate with us what seems unimaginable. I mean, 20 years of Nightboat Books. Can you imagine that I founded a press when I was only 11 years old? Just a prodigy I was. It was, you know, it was in the middle of winter in a snowstorm. It was a blizzard, actually. I was living in the Hudson Valley. It was during the war. It was in the war years. You know, we were in Afghanistan. We were in Iraq. We had this sociopathic president who seemed to lack any empathy or compassion for people. Yeah, you know, here we are again, basically. So I feel like it's more important than ever for presses to do the kind of work that Nightboat does in publishing voices from across the literary, the spectrum of work that's being created. I want to read from 2 of the earliest books that Nightboat published. The very first book that Nightboat published was a reprint of Fanny Howe's Lives of the Spirit, which included a second half that she added on. But I want to read from that second, and I want to read the poetry of Michael Burkhardt, who we lost recently. So I wish he could be here to read these poems to you. And I'll just read you 3 poems from Michael Burkhardt. And I mean, I hope they derange your brain. I like to feed these to generative AI and just really confuse the robot, because this is work at its most human and strange and unspeakable. And he's a unique poet. There's no one to compare him to. I guess an analog might be Jean Valentine at her weirdest. You know what I mean? Don't know what imaginable or unimaginable circumstances played upon her, needless in the night. I saw my work working on my father and my friend who were talking, how do you say, inconsistently? And when one smaller reader left before anyone in the audience could say, hey, stop, I want to talk with you about how you talk to us. But this sounds very hostile, doesn't it? Very much a milieu or a therapist. Someone said I wanted help, who meant to say I needed help, but the help was an expensive one. $160 an hour. As I type out in print, I see how long the amount takes to say. I saw my father working on the home, small accounts, standing, he did, at his dresser. I saw my father close the door to heaven when he went with my mother to talk with her. I saw an endless parrot, or so I thought. The endless parrot was the first bird of spring one year because I walked early down a New York street, a Brooklyn street, when I looked in the window and saw, and I realized this is spring, the first day for our species, and therefore, not about to answer your call because of all the implicit criticism in tone. And yes, I do not say some words right, and yes, I am the one who has let himself be betrayed by himself in matters of self-importance and also art. Is it my art? I don't know. Is it what I do? How do you say small when the radio no longer uses that word? Nothing is ever small anymore. In this small literal box of a radio or handheld small world, too. And what happened to my friend who was run down by a bicycle only a few weeks after being set up, mugged, 2 people followed in a car while one followed on the street? Then it was as if a sudden photograph entered his room. If we sleep in the same room together, even though you seem a canyon away, are you wanting to sleep with me in the endless, endless night? God bless the man. Ghost text. For a long time, I was the only child in my neighborhood. Can't comb hair at night, turning a shoe over a piece of paper and a book up at the house. Talk about the part of me who disappears. And this is the woman in the Clay Museum. Clay, Paul Clay. C died. Someone in the alphabet is always dying. Each letter climbs down into the grave like a lost cloud before a moon cycle or a door cycle completes. Yes, K hung out too long. Yes, N was too lazy, simply eating the marijuana without even heating it. Yes, M explained placebo, was never heard. No, C's parent never followed. My shirt convinced me very, very quietly she was following on a local road. She would turn up in the darkness of the reading. She would understand my wish and my choice. But the road made it easy, and I found my way to the museum's rooftop, and I peered through the skylight until I could read who owned which painting. One had been painted onto burlap. One had been compared to unhappiness. But I could hardly read the writing. So those are 3 poems from Michael Burkhart's book, Lucky Coat Anywhere. We also published a selected poems of his called Envelope of Night, which came out somewhat earlier. So I'd like to read to you again now from the book that I mentioned, Fanny, Howe, Lives of a Spirit. And this book had been originally published by Sun and Moon Press, the great publisher of innovative and experimental work, LA-based, and was out of print by the time we started Nightboat. And in fact, one of the reasons we started Nightboat is that and I say we in that Stephen joined us very, very, very early in Nightboat's life, but I originally co-founded Nightboat with Jennifer Chappis, who is a poet that I had been in the MFA program at NYU with. My internet is not loading the Fanny Howe book, so I may need to go back and just read you one more Michael Burkhart poem and close. I apologize on behalf of the Wi-Fi in the convention center. Yeah, it seems like we're not going to be able to do that. Michael's book is shorter, so it's loading easier. At any rate, I'll finish the story. I won't read to you from the book. And so I wrote to Fanny. You know, we were on the Buffalo Poetics list in that day, and you could just kind of find people's emails. It was all public, sort of, in a weird way. And so I wrote to her kind of out of the blue. It was like AOL.com or something, fqhowe@aol.com. She might still use that email address, actually. Oops. And she wrote back. She said, she said, I'm doing something in New York, I forget what it was. She said, come down and meet me, come to, there was a Starbucks at the time right across the street from the New York Public Library with the lions. She said, I'll meet you in front of the Starbucks. And it was just the strangest thing, because I thought, like, here's Fanny Howe, this like super experimental poet, and it's like, Fanny Howe drinks Starbucks? I remember thinking, like, you know, and it was very cold winter. I went down there. She was sitting in front of the Starbucks, sitting on the ground in front of the Starbucks with like a blanket wrapped around her and one of those woolen hats pulled over her eyes. It's just kind of incredible that at the end of her novel, Saving History, which we actually also published at the end of a collection called Radical Love, which is over there on the table, there's an old lady who's ice fishing. And she's sort of like, she's only on the book for 2 pages, but she's like Queen Elizabeth in Shakespeare in Love. You know, Judi Dench shows up, and she's in the movie for like 3.5 minutes, and she gets nominated for an Oscar, right? That's how this old lady at the end of Saving History is. You know, she kind of shows up and like just dominates the whole book. And I'm walking down the block, and I see this, you know, person sitting on the ground in really cold New York winter, and I'm thinking, like, maybe I will give her some money before I go into the Starbucks. And I'm just, you know, I'm being real with you. And then I get up there close, and it's Fanny. So I thought, you know, I'm going to get along with this woman just fine. Thank you for listening to me go on. I wish I could read that Fanny Howe poem to you, but I will read you one more Michael Burkhardt poem to close and then turn it over. This is a poem called One If by Land. I can't see myself. I've eaten 2 car stories. I asked a friend to pose at the base of a skyscraper, but he said he didn't want to become a souvenir. There is no more alone time in the world or time out, no more corners. A tree breaches a fact in a sister's sleep, but no one else is troubled. If I could just observe for a while, so much to promise, so much to clear up. Yesterday, the cars I saw looked like tribal lines. A funeral was slowing, ebbing around a corner. I could see flowers in the wrong sky. The sky was wrong because it belonged to the sky. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jackie. I apologize. I've sort of lost my voice, and I think I jinxed myself by picking a book about silence to read. But I just wanted to express my gratitude to Nightboat Books and just say a few words about my relationship to the press over the years. And I don't even know if Kazim or Stephen, if you know this, but I used to proofread for Nightboat Books when Kate Zambrino was an editor. So I proofed Daniel Berzutsky's The Book of Interfering Bodies and Banu Kapel's Schizophrene. And I was just a fangirl of Nightboat Books at that time, and I was a huge fan of Banu Kapel, who's one of my favorite writers of all time. And actually, the first AWP that I ever went to was in 2011 in Washington, D.C. I don't know if I should admit this in front of the AWP organizers, but I snuck into the conference because I was just a punk and an autodidact, and I was like, all my favorite writers are gonna be in DC, and I made like a bundle of drawings and writings to give as a gift to Banu at that AWP, and I was too afraid to give it to her because I was like, no, she's a goddess. Like, I can't ever talk to her. Oh my God, she's so brilliant. I listened to her on a panel. And then the person that I was going with, like, you should give it to her, you should give it to her. And then she posted a picture on her blog of the gifts that I had given her And then she started writing me and signing her letters, "Your Punjabi fairy godmother." So she became my fairy godmother after that. So I wanted to, before reading from my book, to read another Nightboat author that I adore, Etel Adnan. I want to read from her book, Shifting the Silence, which is a beautiful meditation on silence that is ultimately a meditation on death. And I think of the book as a way of Adnan to befriend silence in preparation for the ultimate silence. And I'm just totally obsessed with the writings of writers towards the end of their lives. I do a lot of dream work and dream-inspired poetry, and I'm interested also in the dreams people have before dying as well. But this is just such a gorgeous book that was published only a few years before Adnan passed away. And I believe it was in 2021 that she passed away. And she was born in Beirut in 1925, and her writing is so metaphysically dense, but also very vivid. So she was also a painter and trained as a philosopher as well. And I just pulled this quote that she told to her partner, Simone Fatal, before she died. She said, "When I die, the universe will have lost its best friend, someone who loved it with a passion." And I think another thing that's so beautiful about this book is that it's such an affirmation of the beauty of the earth, and you can really tell that she's struggling with, cultivating a sense of joy, given, all the miseries of the world war. The book is particularly engaged with climate issues as well, but she connects to the earth and to the cosmos as a way to honor what is worth loving in creation. So I'll read a few excerpts from Shifting the Silence. Dreams lack any power of decision, but come in bunches, flood the spirit, shake the bones. They favor love-making while we refuse what we yearn for. Watching sunset after sunset doesn't heat the house. There were times when to be overlooked by death created sacred terror, and those times have returned. The rivers continued to run. I followed some, and others I drew. Most frequently, they came as dreams. Some were of an amazing magnitude. Others mixed their waters in oversized waterfalls. I loved them in all instances, but death, I didn't. Death abandoned us, not coming when it was due, not answering. Its enemy, a form of life unstoppable, I mean the ocean, used to appear on stage for events of gigantic dimensions. They spoke human languages besides their own. We pushed them back gradually, polluted them to the brim. We heard not a single cry. This has taken me into the core of a silence that underlines the universe. Underneath the mesh of sounds that never cease, there's a strange phenomena, a counter-reality, the rolling of silent matter. Silence is a flower. It opens up, dilates, extends its texture, can grow, mutate, return on its steps. It can watch other flowers grow and become what they are. Where at the turn of the year, I have to invite somebody or something. The live thickness of the silence makes sounds free themselves and expand. The year is turning, has turned. 2018 is gone forever, gone into being the new year. People are dancing. 2019 has just entered, wide-eyed, utterly new. Okay, so now I'm going to read a few poems from The Sunflower Casts a Spell to Save Us from the Void. And this is a book that I published with Nightboat in 2021. And it's a book of poems inspired by dreams. All of the poems were based on notes that I took in my practice of dream journaling. Wow, I feel like there's some epic, like IMAX film playing upstairs or something. Okay, this poem is titled Death as a Survival Technique. The world is warming and we humans are to blame. In the future, the world will only hold one person, therefore everyone else must die. It is for this reason that I find myself in a Hunger Games caused by global warming. Everyone knows there can only be one survivor. The people are febrile with murderous rage. Though I do not intend to kill anyone, I still must persuade everyone not to kill me. I have to get them to empathize with me, but I don't plead. Sometimes I hide by lying prone atop a pole, pretending to be dead. By making myself visible, I remove the anxiety of being found. My fake death becomes an orchestration that involves as many people as Tupac's pseudo-death. In the distance, I hear Maxine eulogize me. He knows I'm not dead, but to stop people from killing me, he must convince them that I have died. Feigning death makes me privy to how I will be remembered. I think, how sad that people are not alive to experience their funerals because it's the most love they'll ever get. Maxine memorializes people in a way that only a queer who has lived through the AIDS crisis can. But I'm alive. The threat of death calms me. On the shore, there is a crumbling beach house, cold from the iconography of eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. Everything is crumbling as we wait for intermittent waves to hit. Where in this house will I find air to breathe? The walls won't hold. The safety I feel in this structure is false. I am crouched in a corner waiting to die until Elijah comes and asks me to participate in a fashion show to, quote, lighten the apocalyptic mood. Elijah takes me to a warehouse, dresses me in skimpy clothes, and pushes me on stage. Ashamed of my body, I try to cover myself with my hands and arms. From the audience, he yells, "Show more belly!" And then, to celebrate my performance, he takes me into an empty, crumbling house to play me a song on the piano while the house fills with water. Imminent apocalyptic obliteration has brought out everyone's repressed desires. All over the shore, people are having BDSM sex in the ruins. Where did all these leather belts come from? I think. I see my friend all tied up, blissed out, her eyes rolling back in her head. It is a way to prepare for death. The sadists believe they will be the ones who will survive. The masochists embrace their powerlessness in the situation. Freakish weather makes us all non-sovereign. In this sense, the sadists will be punished for their hubris, for their belief that through sheer muscular will, they can beat Mother Nature. The story becomes an epic showdown between sadists and masochists. But I know that the situation calls for total passivity. Maybe that doesn't make sense. Maybe it's a pact with the gods. The secret is to not try. In giving yourself over to the inevitability of death, nothing can hurt you. Nature no longer wants to kill you. You have put yourself at the center of the battle of cosmic forces and lowered your sword. Because you are willing to die, you will be spared. But, I am sad that all my friends will die, even if this situation has turned them against me. Why must only one survive this environmental catastrophe? To submit, to take the passive road to heaven. Survival of the fittest? No. Survival of the best at playing dead. Alrighty, so we're actually at time, so let's give it over to, who's next? Brandon.
It's an absolute honor to be on this stage with these extraordinary poets and to be celebrating Nightboat's 20th anniversary. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. A book that has been important to me and that I'd like to spotlight this afternoon is Orlando White's Letters, spelled with 2 R's. It's a book I've delighted in and learned from and shared with my students. It's a book that exemplifies, I think, much of Nightboat's extraordinary catalog, a catalog that celebrates formal innovation by BIPOC writers, by writers writing critically and creatively, writers writing from the margins, writing transnationally, and writing against the violence of empire, colonialism, and genocide. White's poetics turns our attention to language. I once saw Orlando give a reading where he observed just how young the English language is. That sense of infancy and infantile informs White's book Letters, the title itself a one-word poem, visually echoing Aram Saroyan's Light, or Lighght. Orlando has been writing visual, verbal one-word poems in Dene and English, and he writes on Saroyan's minimalism and the reverberations of the one-word poem in an essay that you can find at the Poetry Foundation. The verbal and visual abundance within individual words is always on display in Orlando's poems, poems that follow Cecilia Vicuna's invitation to go into words, to see. In Orlando's title, I see Let Tears. I see terror and the violence of colonial language. I see terra, the Latin root for land. I think of learning my letters, teaching letters. I think of the horrors of Indian boarding school and the violence of forced assimilation. In her guest editor's note entitled Dene Poetics for the recent special issue on Dene poetry that she edited for Poetry Magazine, Esther Belin writes, originally forced on us, English is now being reconstructed with Dene sound and thought. The English language is currently the first language for most indigenous peoples. Our familiarity with it reflects our relationship with colonialization. Writers are situated in lingual violence as we construct poetics through a colonist's alphabet. As a father, I read White's poems as speaking to the infancy of English and still the possibility of raising it better, raising it with more embodied knowing. But I also read them more literally as fatherhood poems and what it means to be weaned on English under settler colonialism. I'll read the poem from Orlando's book titled Paper Milk. Newborn alphabet cries its vowels, and the page nourishes them. A opens into a U. It becomes a tiny cup, fills with paper milk. The E, too, unfurls to an O and nurses on the colostrum of pulp. Thought attaches sound from motherese to thin sheet of white. Form a structure of feeling, an instrument of print means to foster the verso and recto. We'll be caretakers of our infant text. As writing develops calcium to bring life to ink, letters become collagen of thoughts. As a Chicano and Chinese settler in the Southwest, I want to read a poem from my Nightboat book titled The Tribute Horse. It's a book that focuses on my Chinese grandfather and his immigration from southern China. In the tradition of writers like Maxine Hong Kingston, Russell Leong, Marilyn Chin, I find inspiration and resonance within the resistance of the Angel Island poets who carved their poems in the very walls that detained them at the detention center on Angel Island in the San Francisco Bay. I want to sound out the tragedy of this detention center of the past in order to bring awareness to the 200 plus detention centers operating today and how activists and writers like Silky Shaw have called for the abolition of ICE while pointing to how ICE detention centers are part of the larger prison industrial complex that incarcerates nearly 2 million people in prisons, jails, and detention centers. At Angel Island, on the barrack wall in room 105, a Chinese migrant carved the famous Li Po poem, often translated as night thoughts or quiet night thoughts. The poem from the Tribute Horse that I'll read is a curation of homophonic translations of Li Po's short 4-line poem. These transliterations listen to the echoes of Angel Island while celebrating a subversive poetics of mistranslation and a sonorous multiplicity of migrant voices. poem's called Ulipo. So then me and you come, you assured led by the tongue, dark fall, a winding wind, a detour, circles song. Drum dim when the rain comes, erasure the song sung, details wandering in a wren, ditto cuckoo song. Truth bends when you hum, jig, lure, reel, rig, sen, bird calls wander heavens, the fall circles round. Often we were conned, trees were things wrens sung, too tall, wild in mid-air, falsettos so soon hamstrung. Kerplunk plans mean you've come. Be sure these songs swim. Phone call frogmen when tempos spiral down. Bunk beds wing me across. Secure belongings bobbin. Sea walls make waves mist. Tiptoe tidal flats. Trouble the sea for a sun. Feel sure you don't belong. You don't write what men say. Sea tales consume song. Trundled nights of a nun. Fissures between rival tongs. You sell wontons here. Detuned doo-wop songs. Backhand within each psalm, young girl in a tea-stained sarong, make do the light, the long nightmare, lingo miscues song. Just in sweet meat buns, ensure deeds with alms, doorbells wane once you're in, dark clouds sluice down shrubs, strum, then strings you've strung. Speech churs inside tongues. You sell wrong names here. Data research shows. Trunks fend off wind that comes. Leeward they have swung. So long waiting here, this talk cites coups wrong. A monk lends me his car. Bugs chirr sovereign songs. Clouds shawl a wan mien. A junco suitor calls. Drunk wren between me and dawn, expert far-flung tongue, forestall the fading path, burrow straight through song. Translate dreams in suns, be sure to tear shit up. Due to wagers made here, pray tell absurd sounds. Dressed in tight-ass funds, he sure street fought some, shut out wrong men here. All told, Buckles' song. Trumped again, add up sums, leave sure you've had your fun. Dutiful sons wandered here, laid down bicycles in the sun. Locket syrinx in a palm, procure mahjong songs, judo bygone riffraffs, echoes pseudo song.
Hi, everyone. Like everyone else on this stage, I'm grateful to be here and grateful to you all for showing up midday. I could talk about Nightboat and what it means to me for days, and we don't have the time for that. But I did want to acknowledge, like, presses make a space in the culture for certain kinds of work to happen. And Nightboat does something no other press does, and makes a space in the culture that no other press does. And it's in creating that space, it also means writers and artists can walk into that space. And so many of the writers who are here have made space possible for so many of us in this room. And so many of the writers in the catalog have made art and life possible for so many of us. And I just am grateful to be a part of that project. I'm going to read from a book by Brandon Shimoda, Hydra Medusa. Brandon's long multi-book project is impossible to summarize right now, but broadly speaking, it addresses the transgenerational trauma stemming from World War II, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also the internment of Japanese American citizens. The books are haunted and haunting. They do a lot of dream work, visionary work. And this particular poem is called Where Does Design Come From? And it is sort of addressing one of the internments in the West, in the desert. Where does design come from? Manifesting forms of resistance required design. The Japanese consulted the desert. The desert, unknown to them, had opinions. Was the desert accustomed to sharing? The gardens were oases predicated on the arrangement of stones, opinions, transfigurations of time and space, the illusions of time and space into effigies. Where does design come from? It is teased, requires a period of conscious and unconscious preparation in the form of distress, aspiration, disease. And now I'm going to read from Poem Bitten by a Man. I'm going to read 4 short pieces of it. One of the honors of working with Nightboat is that one feels very closely read. And the book designer, Kit Schluter, and I had much back and forth. But in order to design the book, Kit read it and metabolized it and then wrote a beautiful letter that summarized something about the book that I was too close to it to understand, which was that it's essentially about American forms of violence. And so I'm going to read, it's also too complicated to really explain, but this poem is called White Flag, 1955. It's an ekphrastic poem in conversation with a Jasper Johns painting. And I wrote it in memory of Lauren Berlant, and in dialogue with her book, The Queen of America Goes to Washington City, which is a genius, nearly prophetic work of criticism at this point. The flag's an affect, white as migraine, debilitating and interesting to lie down inside. The surface churn of pigment and wax, and figure how I feel, beginning with structure, a layer of paper and cloth collage over stretched sateen, sensual bedclothes of a rough fuck, paramnesia streaked with semen, the way sexuality hooks up with national fantasy, queer, and visited by crippling symptoms in the visual field of citizenship. I've been here before. As a boy, I earn a badge of merit, learning to handle the flag correctly. It takes a long time to remember all the rules, to fold and store it properly. It's the gentlest I have seen the white fathers who teach us, who take more care with that fabric than they do with a sissy, afraid of their Cold War masculinity, indifferent to their curriculum of flags, targets, and maps. I fashion a passionate impassivity in the locker room a lot, like Jasper Johns, his ready-made images. I like about them that they come that way, he says. I'm very stupid, politically, actually, he says. Pretty much like a jockstrap, holding state knowledge, a sight of the full coming together of violence and reason. Dear Johns, thank you for the headache. I hate your archive. A faggot has no true flag. And then I'm going to read two poems that I consider studio visits with artists either that I loved or knew. And these are prose collage. Heartbeat of paper, a somatic language. Every material has several possibilities, Ruth Asawa writes in her college notebook. Let's find out. Listening to these pages, I move my body from paper to paper to paper to paper, continuous as the single strand of wire she loops into biomorphic sculpture, gorgeous in vagination. I always begin on the inside. She knits, gold, the outside surface, inside the next. In this photo, the tips of several fingers bandaged as she loops the wire to itself, abstracting the material, abstractus, both incorporeal and isolated, secluded. But I like abstraction best when I've seen the hands that made it. I like the photo more knowing her friend Imogen Cunningham trades 3 years of photographs for house repairs done by Asawa's architect husband. Even her mentor, Josef Albers, Bauhaus formalist, teaches never to see anything in isolation. Define space, define an object, by defining the space around it. Ideas that aren't solved don't have shapes yet, like the white space around these lines. During the war, the state seizes her family's Southern California farm and interns them all in Rower, Arkansas. At Black Mountain, she falls in love with a white man from Georgia. In San Francisco, years ago, not far from here, Cunningham brings homemade Satsuma jam to her door. First gift of a friendship from which more forms flow. And this is the second studio visit. This is with for Kathleen Fraser in her memory, another Nightboat poet. When rain blows in from the Pacific, the windows rattle in their frames. At my desk, I listen to the building touch itself and tremble. One small wall heater in the flat's front room. We wear sweaters to bed. I've never lived with a lover before. I haven't loved anyone so helplessly since I was an infant, which means I can't see Robert clearly at all. I just hand myself over to him, the way a nurse gives a swaddled newborn to its mother. After visiting us, Kathleen warns, I'll have to fight for my writing. She says she can tell he won't make space. Dear other, I address him in sentences, each word a precedent for what new order, forward movement, to live a creative life. Money makes it hard from the start. Sometimes Kathleen takes me to lunch in a glamorous swoop of laughter, a tiny black convertible in which I barely fit. Grand in a messy headscarf and chunky jewelry, she makes me think poetry might be possible in this city. But she has money. Sends me home with bread and leftovers, a gift I share with Robert on the couch in front of a space heater, the way I want to share what I learned from her poems, the powerful field of her reality. But I don't yet know how to begin to talk to him, to bring into words fragments I conspire with him to hide. It is part of my commitment to him and myself. It is my politics and my love. Flag 1954 to 55. To Johns, I write, a faggot has no true flag, as if his painting, a simulacrum on a bedsheet in layers of newspaper dipped in hot wax, could be a true flag. I know it's not. Plus, not a flag. The way a faggot's not a man, plus not a man. I hate his archive, but I like this snapshot of him, just 2 years out of the army, crouching beneath this painting in 1955, pale and boyish, former soldier, the historian calls a docile body, object and target of power. Johns says he dreamt of painting this, a fact art critics repeat without asking why. The historian calls the soldier's body a fragment of mobile space, as if war were just collage. Soldier cut out of context, pasted into another, like Times Man of the Year in 1951. Name, American. Occupation, fighting man. Johns is drafted, works on graphic design in Japan, while soldiers and civilians, millions, die in Korea. And now here he is in a New York loft, his boyfriend behind the camera, saucepans and hot plate on the floor, white mound of beeswax to make encaustic, for 8 more stars, each detail part of a political anatomy, still unfinished. Thank you so much.
Oh, now I can see y'all. Got those blinded by the lights over there. Hi. I'm going to flip the script a little bit and start with some poems from my own book, Instructions for the Lovers, which was published by Nightboat in June. I'm doing that because the poet whose work I would like to share with you today is Akila Oliver, and I want Akila Oliver's words to be the last words that you hear when you leave this room. It's an honor to be a Nightboat author. I have to say, it's more than a press. When I'm at AWP, I realize how much of a community we are. And, you know, there are many ways toward resistance and refusal in this particular historic political catastrophe. But I think that gathering in person in community with writers and artists and thinkers is one of the most important possibilities for resistance and refusal. So I thank you, Nightboat, for providing that for us. After wind, 'After wind, was water. After we were water, when water subsumed, when the thing that was water, when our arms were water, our gestures flower, our gestures bloom, when it was, when we were, when water was not, when we subsumed water, when we shivered into. The last section of this collection is called Black Aliveness. And it's actually called The Photographs, Black Aliveness. And the reason it's called The Photographs is because I was working with the social practice artist Jean Lee, who did this project where he started collecting Polaroids of Black people. And it started when he just found some on the ground, and then he started actively trying to bring this collection together. And there's over 5,000 Polaroids of Black people that he found. Some he purchased on eBay. And it just really spoke, the collection really speaks to, in some ways, how Black bodies are always commodified. In some way, there's some attempt to commodify Blackness and Black people and Black life. And the photographs themselves kind of resist that at the same time that they're being collected and sold on eBay, collected for a museum exhibition, et cetera. And so I wrote these poems that were originally in the exhibition book. So I'll just read the epigraphs and then a couple of the poems, and then Akila Oliver. The first epigraph is from Kevin Kwashi. The manner and sensation of how we pay attention to our being constitute our being itself, as well as what our being is becomes in the world. From Ronaldo V. Wilson, Black aliveness as sane, wild, alert, infinite, and forever. And from Jean Lee, study is always becoming practice. No one weeps a day's décolletage plunges us into what desire leaves in the wake of a radiant abyss, black light, oxymoron of our being, voluminous shape, any shade of blackness, body. A rose pressed between teeth, this wild intercourse, stillness. I dive into the white frame, my hair alive with a young newness of becoming JD lighting J birthday cake candles 1982. What are we now? How could we know anything else but this textured comforter? Fingers trace its web white cracks, its shadow stains from the wear of existence. Now you enter submissively, bowing to the qualities of light velvet as skin, interiors, transport, or a strobe light world, where the word an imagined form of being, black pose, stray keys come about, smear of dissidence and rolling stones and hand gestures, no nation mask, glimpse gaze out, a counterpoint to Christina Sharp's anti-black weather. Frame what cannot be captured, what cannot be contained in the tattered corners, Scotch tape residue, what vestiges of water remain untraceable when it's not you and them, but me and them, could be royal, as in we got a dog, how you exit the stage. Speaking of water, I need mine. Okay, so what's weird about Akilah Oliver is one of my heroes. She died suddenly, I think in 2011, found in her apartment after missing a gig at the Poetry Project in New York, I believe. The strange thing is that I never met Akilah Oliver. Black lesbian, experimental poet. We had all the same friends. We were both, Poetry Project people. We were both Naropa people. And so I just feel like we missed each other. And I miss her, even though we never met. I'm going to read from, so this is a reprint by Nightboat. And I want to read from the introduction, and then I'll just end with a couple of poems. It's from the She Said Diaries, Flesh Memory. And, when I think about this work, I just think about the way in which her innovative approach to language and identity, including, race and gender and sexual orientation, is irreducible, and this irreducibility is a kind of, maybe it's a way of escape. But this is what she says it better than I do. So I'll just read you from what she says about her own work and then a couple of the poems. What I'm trying to do in these poems is investigate the nonlinear synapses between desire, memory, blackness, as both a personal identity and a non-essentialist historical notion, sexuality and language. There are many encoded references to pop culture, gospel music, and African-American colloquial speech. The block form is a kind of container to hold the narrative or dialogue for some of the pieces. I see the poems very much as an exploration of flesh memory, as a field of investigation. I think for me, part of the importance of this text is situated in the ongoing work I've been doing in performance with the concept of flesh memory as it relates to a critical interrogation of the African American literary performative tradition. The tradition, what I consider to be crouched in the sacred profane dichotomy, a dichotomy which Du Bois calls double consciousness, is an outgrowth of a necessitated survival mechanism which has split Black consciousness, not only in terms of the outward homogeneous mask donned as a form of cultural preservation, but also in terms of the internal discourse, what is permissible to speak. The work I've been consciously doing seeks to disrupt this tradition, to play not only with language and form, but with the representational idioms of Blackness, femaleness, homogeneity, the bluntness of sexual references, often linking the sacred traditions, church, gospel icons with the profane, pussy, fucking, is one way the dialogues seek to work as a kind of insurgent text within the African American literary tradition. Another morning, she says, A red sea of ambrosia is my God's nectar, and my God's anonymity wails in tongues, pawned in once a Negro time to St. Louis, a little girl with grandma and cold fried chicken did go, and passenger trains shank underground, and desire and need sweat under armpits, and I smell streets, and sad morning rises like baptismal mist from the steamy holy water in which we try not to drown and close. To float is the saddest kind of survival. First take before sunrise, she said. Sweet tongue, sifting stained glass over dust tracks down a road that ain't Georgia. This time of dark morning, this is the face I give for satisfaction, unbathed. This is the teeth I use in plural disagreement, a people long ways from shore. This is the ear. No, these is the ears. I want to hear sound, slight as gesture, bellowing way down in my belly, baby. Way down in my belly, bellowing way down. Disquieting morning I breathe, an act outside my will, strangely lifelike. Sin and salvation are twins. Summer lets go its sail, touches the bottom of my gut. The soul does similar tricks without an audience. I see there is no separation between earth and sky. Elvis Presley already died to be anointed king by ghost seekers, compartment of space invented to live in. Artificial dominions of good and evil fail to impress. The great depths to which I am likely to fall. Search for soul. I don't mind if Jesus is my friend. I want my friends to answer when I call. Faces of children smeared with lullabies to a redundant Satan. It is not that I am personally guilty, only culpable, capable of falling, more probable than flying. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Brandon, Jackie, Brian, Don, and Kazim. One more big round of applause for our readers. And please join us for a book signing down the hallway and visit us at booth 335. Thanks for being here.